The evening sun was dipping low, casting a warm orange glow over the long line of cars stretching endlessly ahead. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white as the horn of another impatient driver blared somewhere behind him. He had been on the road for nearly an hour, crawling at a snail's pace, and the familiar knot of frustration was tightening in his chest. All he wanted was to get home, sink into his couch, and leave the day behind him. Instead, he was stuck in this motionless sea of metal, breathing in exhaust fumes and feeling his temper boil. Traffic had always been Marcus's enemy. It was as though the universe conspired against him, piling these endless obstacles on an already heavy day. He thought of the emails that went unanswered, the meetings that drained him, the deadlines waiting for him tomorrow. Each thought pressed down like bricks on his shoulders. Now, this standstill felt like the final insult. He tapped his fingers nervously on the steering wheel, muttering under his breath as though the cars ahead could hear him and move faster. As the minutes dragged on, the anger inside him seemed to swell. He could feel his pulse quickening, his jaw tightening. The heat inside the car felt suffocating, though the air conditioner was running. Marcus wasn't just trapped in traffic, he was trapped inside his own impatience. He clenched his teeth and sighed heavily, a sound that echoed the helplessness he carried. There was something almost symbolic about it all, though he couldn't see it yet. Life often felt like this traffic jam, endless, unfair, beyond his control. He wanted things to move, to change, to bend to his will. But the more he fought against what he couldn't control, the more powerless he felt. Still, Marcus couldn't let go. To him, anger felt like a weapon, a way of pushing back against the circumstances that mocked him. The car in front of him moved forward a few feet, and Marcus immediately stomped on the gas, only to slam the brakes a moment later as everything came to a stop again. The cycle repeated, endlessly accelerate, brake, sigh, curse under his breath. His frustration wasn't just about the traffic anymore. It was about his life, his feeling of being stuck, the sense that no matter how hard he tried, something always slowed him down. In that moment, Marcus couldn't imagine any other way to feel. To him, anger was natural, automatic. He didn't yet know that this very traffic jam would teach him a lesson about himself, one that would stay with him far longer than the journey home. Marcus drummed his fingers restlessly against the steering wheel, his thoughts tangled in irritation. But then, as he glanced at the lane beside him, something unexpected caught his attention. In the car just to his right, another driver sat calmly, the faint sound of music drifting from his open window. The man appeared to be about the same age, yet his face carried no trace of frustration. His head swayed gently with the rhythm, lips moving silently to the lyrics, as though the traffic jam was nothing more than a pause in his day. Marcus frowned, almost offended by the sight. How could someone be so calm in this mess? Didn't he feel the same suffocating impatience? Didn't he care about the time being wasted? The questions buzzed in Marcus's head like static, fueling his irritation even more. But as the minutes dragged on, he couldn't help stealing more glances at the man beside him. There was something magnetic about that calmness, something Marcus couldn't quite understand but couldn't ignore either. The music playing from the man's car blended with the glow of the sunset, painting the scene with an odd sense of peace. Marcus's own car, however, felt like a cage. His chest was tight, his muscles tense, and every second stretched like an eternity. Yet here was someone in the same situation, on the same road, surrounded by the same frustrations, and he was choosing something entirely different. That thought lingered like a whisper Marcus didn't want to hear. Could it really be a choice? He always thought emotions controlled him, that anger was the inevitable response to circumstances beyond his control. But this man, this stranger, was proving him wrong. The contrast between them was so sharp it was almost painful. Marcus was sweating with impatience, while the other driver looked as though he was on a leisurely evening drive. The minutes continued to crawl, the traffic unchanged, yet Marcus felt a shift within himself. His irritation didn't vanish, but it became layered with curiosity, with the faint beginnings of reflection. Why was he letting the situation consume him? The cars weren't moving any faster because of his anger. His tapping fingers and muttered curses weren't changing anything at all. In fact, they were only exhausting him further. Marcus leaned back in his seat, loosening his grip on the steering wheel ever so slightly. He closed his eyes for a brief moment and let out a long breath. For the first time in a long while, he asked himself a question he had never considered before. If he couldn't control the road, Could he at least control himself? The question lingered in Marcus's mind, soft but persistent. He turned his head once more, watching the other driver laugh to himself, as though sharing a private joke with the music. That image etched itself deeply into Marcus's thoughts. It was proof that peace could exist even here, in the middle of chaos. The traffic hadn't changed. The frustration of waiting was still there, but the reaction, that was the difference. Marcus slowly reached toward his car stereo. His fingers hesitated for a moment, as if resisting a surrender he didn't yet understand. Then, with a quiet click, music filled the car. A soft melody, familiar but long forgotten, drifted through the speakers. At first, it felt strange, almost forced. His shoulders were still tight, his mind still racing. But as the song played on, something inside him began to loosen. His breaths grew steadier. The weight pressing down on his chest lightened, little by little, as though the music was quietly dismantling his anger. The cars around him remained frozen, the horns still blaring here and there. Yet Marcus felt a subtle shift. It wasn't the world outside that was changing, it was him. He began to notice the sky, streaked with shades of pink and gold, as the day melted into night. He noticed the rhythm of the cars moving in short bursts, like waves rising and falling against a shore. For the first time in years, traffic wasn't his enemy. It was simply a part of life, temporary and fleeting. Marcus smiled faintly, almost surprised at himself. The anger he had clung to felt unnecessary now, like a heavy coat in warm weather. He realized how much energy he had wasted fighting what he couldn't change. In contrast, choosing calm didn't weaken him, it gave him control. The other driver hadn't taught him with words, yet the lesson was clear. Peace isn't given by circumstances, it's chosen from within. By the time the traffic began to finally clear, Marcus felt lighter than he had in weeks. The frustration that once defined his evenings had been replaced by something far gentler. He couldn't control delays, the demands of his job, or the chaos of the world, but he could choose how to meet them. And in that choice, he found a quiet strength he hadn't known before. As his car rolled forward into the open road, Marcus carried more than relief at reaching home. He carried the simple but powerful truth that while life may not bend to his will, his reaction could reshape his experience of it. And in that truth, he discovered a peace he could return to, no matter how heavy the traffic ahead. Life often places us in situations we cannot escape: traffic jams, delays, disappointments, unexpected turns. But the story of Marcus reminds us that the true power lies not in controlling what happens, but in choosing how we respond. Anger may feel automatic, but peace is always available if we are willing to embrace it. The power of reaction is a quiet strength, a decision to protect our inner calm, even when the world around us feels overwhelming. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs the reminder, and consider liking, commenting, and subscribing for more tales.